Hello, I'm Vigil. This is my stream journal. The date is 7/14/2022. The time is 21:00. I'm going to go over the various strategies for the Cold War and the players and everything that's going to happen based upon my analysis. I'm not a prophet. I am not a seer yet. I don't know the future. I'm just using predictive logic. So the alliances that we're seeing being formed right now is America and friends, which include America, Israel, Taiwan, South Korea, Australia, Europe or NATO, Japan, and Ukraine. The enemy forces are communists, Islam, and cartels. The Chinese cat are the communist autocratic technocracy, North Korean hermit kingdom, Iran and surrounding proxy forces. The sickos are the Soviet intelligence community operating oligarchs, global radical Islam networks including ISIS, Taliban, and other former CIA projects, Afghanistan, large swaths of Africa, South American communist governments, and South American cartels. These are the two main player groups in this current emerging Cold War that is currently fighting proxy fights against each other. Ukraine is fighting the Russian sickos using weapons that have been supplied by America and NATO allies. The Chinese cat is currently running desensitization missions on the air defense systems of Taiwan, which is what the Islamic forces did against Israel right before the war. Iran is racing to get the nuclear bomb, and Israel is most likely preparing for a first strike with air forces and a complete ground invasion if Iran refuses to stop their weapons programs. Cartels are currently funneling 6 million immigrants from the entire global population to the American homeland. This number is going to jump exponentially from my gut intuition, which includes American-labeled terrorist groups or individuals, while also moving into the nation a large supply of drugs and weapons, with the whole operation being worth roughly $1 trillion a year because of the black markets of the war on drugs. They've been seen training their entire communities in paramilitary operations for the purpose of running local-level terrorism against the local-level governments across the entire nation. Their strategy includes kidnapping, torture, and murder of mayors, judges, cops, and citizens like journalists and others to break the will of the American people and force them into submission. North Korea is unveiling new missile technology while continuing their nuclear weapons program, which has an estimated 50 nukes. It should be noted that their nation operates without the transistor, giving them an edge in any nuclear conflict, and they have been tunneling since the last war, which was 70 years ago, with full citizenship indoctrination for any conflict. They are a hard people who will endure any amount of death, which means that any war with North Korea will be fought to their last man. The desire to destroy America and her allies, along with her taking the nation of South Korea, or they desire that. The current strategies that every side is likely planning and preparing to use. Cartels will continue to flood weapons and drugs into America for the profit motivation of $1 trillion a year at the current estimates of how much money is in the black market. Will they continue to move immigrants into the nation at a rate that will continue to increase in number? It is currently averaging 6 million people a year, but the number is likely to continue increasing until America collapses. It is from this flood of people that they will start to recruit poor, uneducated, without any real future, into their gangs, which are currently in Mexico training in paramilitary-style operations so they can run local-level terrorism against every single mayor, judge, lawyer, police officer, etc., using extreme terrorism that kidnaps, tortures, and murders them to coerce their behavior. American strategy for fighting this doesn't really exist right now. They are currently being controlled by a corrupted, dying man in dementia who is destroying the entire system from within. The cops will likely break rapidly as the no-knock visits from the cartels in their homes begin, along with everyone else in the local level government. America can't actually start fighting back in any coherent way until she sees that this is an invasion and starts to actively work against it. Local level cops, judges, mayors, etc. will break as soon as it starts. America really doesn't have the strength to endure what the enemy forces likely to do as their strategy. This seems unlikely with the current reacting to this or admitting it's happening seems unlikely with the current president in office, with all other communities that are currently in power. What strategy does America have, or what are the options? She can end the war on drugs and end the $1 trillion money fund that the enemy forces are currently using to fuel its operations. They are fueling their operations with our war on drug black market. So just legalize it, endure the drug abuse, but fucking get rid of the money problem. She can close the borders and start to build a growing refugee camp settlements in Mexico and other nations for the flood of immigrants that are leaving their homes because of war and global warming. She can immediately reverse laws regarding restricting gun rights and start to arm every single citizen in the nation with a handgun and rifle. We can begin creating small local networks of defense systems and shit. Declare the reality that the immigration is part of a larger strategy and a war plan that is currently being nudged into play by larger players like China, who is sending the drugs and weapons, and begin preparing counterterrorism and internal defense forces to combat the enemy threats. Really, it is essential that the black market be removed to cut the funding. This is the essential component. The next hotspot will begin looking The next hotspot that we will be looking at is Iran and proxy forces that are aimed at Israel. The Iran government is trying to build a nuclear weapon for one purpose, and that is to wipe away and destroy the entire nation of Israel and genocide her population. They are near completing the bomb, and so Israel has to strike first, which requires an invasion force to cross Iraq and move into Iran. The right flank of Iran is Afghanistan, which is why Biden gave it to the enemy forces. He is an internal spy from an enemy force that is dismantling the framework that was established to win this war 20 years ago. Israel and America will have to figure out a way to overcome Iran, and has to be the ones to strike first, because a nuclear-capable Iran striking first eliminates the entire nation of Israel automatically. There is a second option, though, that is available, which is to begin full-scale evacuations of Israel to America. The level of temperatures in 20 years will create a black death zone where the heat kills anyone who's outside within just a few minutes. It will be unlivable in the cities of Israel because of global warming, so we should think several steps ahead to move the entire nation of Israel to America and incorporate them into our democracy as full citizens. Islam and Syria and all the other nations likely have a better fit with like Russia and whatnot. Although I don't not condone bringing them to America. I think it would be a hard integration, but if they don't have the will to leave, which they will have to in any ways in 30 years, then they have to launch a first strike and cripple Iran. The best option they have is to locate the entire network working on building the bombs and every single personnel and hit them all at once in a massive coordinated strike, destroying their ability to build the bomb for decades to come. They'd have to start over, retrain the scientists. You just wipe out the complete research and development program, all the bases, all the personnel, all the documents they had on it. This will trigger, though, a full hornet's nest response from their proxies. You need to increase the firing rate of the Patriot-type missiles that are surrounding Israel so that larger volleys can still be defeated. They're firing just one or two at a time. Next time they'll fire in volleys, and you have to have your Patriot missiles prepared for that. Iran will rush into Israel to destroy her going through Syria or Iraq. A Navy task force with an extremely large amount of jets that can do air-to-ground attacks needs to be moved into the sea to the left of Israel and down below the Gulf. Do not go into the channel or what it's called the Strait. That's where the swarms will hit you, and the missile ground-to-ship missiles will hit you. So you need to keep yourselves relatively far away from the land. Your flight times will increase, but you'll save your ships. It'll take more time to run operations, but your ships will not be destroyed if you move them too close to the land. Well, ground forces from America are placed in Israel, and the Air Force moves massive amounts of their planes to the nation of Israel to run operations alongside the Israel people. The Israel Defense Force, augmented, supported, running in it's called, I can't remember what it's called, working together with the American military, will push into Iraq, creating a moving defense line that does a controlled, slow retreat while firing at the Iranian military that is trying to rush into Israel and blitzkrieg them. The intention of this is to create a zone between the two forces that moves backwards as the Iranians push towards Israel, slowing them down and causing them to have an extremely high amount of friction, while air forces run constant flight ops against their forces and continue to hit bridges and supply lines as they try to advance. When they hit the culminating point of the gaps in their attacks created by the airstrikes start to hiccup, the Iranian attack, then the moving defense line pushes forward and the Iranian forces have to restart their invasion at the beginning ground again. This would have been made a lot easier if Afghanistan hadn't fallen, because an American staging force in Afghanistan would force the Iranian military to divide their forces into two fronts. If they committed their entire force to the attack on Israel, then the eastern flank would have been open for American mechanized divisions to roll in without any opposition, which is why Biden and the rest of the traitors gave it up. If it is possible to retake Afghanistan, then it should be done. The global war on terror falls apart when there is that large of a sanctuary city, so you'll probably be forced to reinvade Afghanistan after the next terrorist attack, which CIA theoretically says could be any day now. They said a year ago that it could be a year before we get hit. Every day the probability increases. The next hot zone is North Korea and South Korea, with the allies of America and Japan fighting in this theater. North Korea has been building a stockpile of nuclear missiles that is roughly 50 nukes strong. They have zero transistors in their nation, making their nation essentially hardened from EMP attacks, and they have been digging and preparing for the invasion and war for the last 70 years. Their strategy will be to disrupt America with a nuclear strike or mini strikes with them, likely moved in covertly on airplanes, ships, containers, or by foot or in truck through the open American borders. If they strike America first, we will lose her entire system to the EMP blast. They are likely going to use a high-altitude attack using commercial planes to cause a complete system failure. They will then unleash a barrage of conventional weapon attacks against Seoul, and it'll be destroyed within a day, and then they'll move their forces in. They will likely hit Japan, South Korea, and America, along with any other allies that they deem to be a component in the response to their conventional attacking in Seoul. The strategy to eliminate this force is not yet clear to me. It will require some of the bloodiest fighting America has ever seen. I'm still working on this leader's strategy. Next is China and Taiwan. It should be made clear right now that America is a shock absorber for the entire start of the war. She'll be hit with nuclear strikes, paramilitary ground forces attacking with terrorism used against the local level government, and with higher government likely being destroyed. Every single ally of America should expect to fight without her, since she will be destroyed and tortured from within if everything goes full scale. If you're living in America, you might want to consider leaving it. Things are escalating. I don't know how long it'll be. If it happens, hopefully it never happens. But if you think it could happen, you should probably get out of America. And going to another nation because of this war, America is the human shield that absorbs all the major player first strikes. It is this reason that most, if not all, the strategies that we design and create must not include American support to defeat the enemy threat, besides like the ships on the ocean and the bases around the world, which likely will be hit. Anyways, the Communist Party in China, or the CAT, Communist Autocratic Technocracy, wants to completely eliminate the government and people of Taiwan to prevent them from claiming that they are the rightful government of China. No other community can unite the Chinese dissenters and the homeland population like the Taiwan government. This is why China hates the island. In any confrontation, they will be completely destroyed. They will not try to capture them. They will be destroyed with overwhelming force. This means that Taiwan has to consider the longer-term strategy and start preparing her military to leave the island and move them into staging areas that are hidden with the intention of moving her entire defense force into the mainland of China to wage an insurgency that will become a civil war recruiting from the homeland populace. Small 5 to 10 man teams operating as nodes in mesh networks that is running operations to disrupt the entire homeland while recruiting homeland citizens into the fight is the best option that Taiwan has. This option can win, but the frontal defense against the homeland attack won't. The next hot spot is an active combat zone, and it's Ukraine. I'm still working on the strategy, but essentially the sickos or the Soviet intelligence community's operating oligarchs invaded the nation of Ukraine and is pressing into it with their forces. If Ukraine is able to push them back to the Russian border, then Russia threatens to go nuclear. NATO and the sickos are now preparing in a force build up to deter the other from attacking. This could easily go nuclear and destroy the planet. The strategy for this one is not yet clear to me. I'm working on it. I think that Putin's death might be essential. Killing him or waiting till he dies by trying to slow down the war, making it a war of attrition, or like the Ukraine, if she wins and retakes her territory, I don't know how a bitter peace on the border might be possible. It seems unlikely. Putin's not going to step down, and he won't face trial without going nuclear and destroying all of the planet to save himself from being put on trial. But those are the main strategies. America, she should be moving assets, supplies, personnel out of America. Because if a war does begin, we're the shock absorber. We like American homeland will be hit with so many strikes, so many attacks, that everything will be destroyed. Plus, we'll erupt into a civil war with cartels moving in, immigrants and shit. We should view America now as an ideology, not an actual nation or government. I mean, not a country or government. America now is a nation of ideology, like a libertarian constitutional republic, democracy or whatever. And we have to realize that we're going to have to go into a resistance network. When America falls, and it's falling in real time, the ideology of America can continue. Freedom and right to speech, right to self-defense, all these things that we currently are dismantling and destroying. I think transitioning to a new name is, I don't know, if we understand America as a nation, not a state or a country or even a populace, and understand America now as an ideology of freedom and libertarian values, and that's an umbrella term for an all-encompassing of libertarian ethics and stuff. I think that's the strategy we should use to continue the fight indefinitely. In any war that's major, America is completely wiped off the map. And then, or even a single hemp detonated before our missile shield can get it, would still disrupt our border, or like our entire eastern or western border or whatever, and like our nation would collapse into chaos. We're already burning down every building because of police violence and stuff, and cartels are moving in. Like America, as we know it, is over. America as an ideology or a nation that is without borders, without government, without state, and is really an ideology that will continue to spread as the resistance continues indefinitely, is a real thing. And like so, like all of the allies of America should be preparing to fight their wars with a strategy that does not include America. Like, if you're an American, like if you are currently a part of the American government or whatever, you should be creating what's known as RedNet, or the redundancy network, and that's where you start moving tons of supplies out of America into locations that can be used to fight the war after the initial strike destroys our nation. And like World War III will be a hellish fight. Everything will collapse. Billions will die from like starvation, and like even sinking a single carrier with a nuclear reactor on it could theoretically poison the ocean. And so like even conventional warfare that expands to sinking a U.S. carrier, essentially you poison the ocean. Like you sink a sub that's nuclear, you poison the ocean theoretically. And like, so I guess Taiwan should expect to move all of her, or should be preparing her forces for guerrilla operations in the homeland, move them out of the countries, and like have them around to slip into the homeland and run paramilitary operations, guerrilla insurgency, recruiting from the populace of the homeland while they disrupt everything to take down the system of the Chinese government that's communist, and then wage the civil war with the Taiwan government claiming true leadership of the Chinese people. And they're with correct propaganda, target audiences, like you will recruit lots of people out of 1.2 billion, even if you only get 1%, that's still like 10 million people strong to fight an insurgency. If you get 2%, that's 20 million people strong, I think, if I did the math right. I always lose the zeros, lose track of them. Ukraine, if she can push Russia back to the border, who knows if she can. A bitter peace might be the only mechanism, but also killing Putin might be the only option to prevent nuclear war between the two nations. I think the bullet, though, has to be pulled by a Russian. I think any other nation shooting Russian presidents would be bad. But a Russian, I don't know if you can even legally say that to kill Putin. So theoretically, hypothetically, in this education scenario, and this is all just for education, Putin's death might be the only way to prevent Russia from nuking everyone. The North Koreans, they've been digging tunnels, preparing conventional weaponry to destroy South Korea. They have a no transistor society, so they can literally detonate a nuclear weapon, a hemp, above their own nation and take out all the surrounding areas. And our missile shields can't get to it because it's in their territory. They're not going to fire it lobbing it over to us. They're going to fire it straight up and detonate it in the high altitude and take out half the globe with a hemp. And Israel, Israel, the best strategy they have is to use jets and special forces to destroy the entire network that was building the nuclear weapons. And every document needs to be destroyed, every personnel working on it has to be eliminated, and the infrastructure has to be destroyed. And so that's doable for Israel. Israel can do shit like that. But then Iran will respond, and the hornet's nest around her will respond. So she needs to push into Iraq, create a moving defense line that slowly pulls forward, creating an endless assault for uphill for the Iranians. And really, losing Afghanistan destroyed the global war on terror strategy. It created 18 million recruits underage for ISIS. It created a sanctuary city, and it's going to be the result of numerous terrorist attacks in the future. Numerous. It's going to be a sanction for ISIS, and we're going to have to reinvade. It's predictable. And so why did we leave Afghanistan? There was no real logic to it. It was 2,000 units in safe locations doing logistics. No one was in danger, and we just destroyed a 20-year war that we had pretty much won. And it would have only taken another 30 years to re-indoctrinate them into a secular belief system. He left it because it was the Iranian flank. It's what created the deterrence for Iran to attack Israel in her strike. And like, if you had mechanized divisions staged on Iran's right border, and you had, then like she couldn't attack with her full force in Israel. She would have to have her defenses on her flank. Now she doesn't have to have that, and like, that's why he gave up Afghanistan. He's a terrorist spy, like, and or he, who knows, like, but it was, he's dismantling your entire nation, and it's in plain sight, and like. Anyway, so America as a resistance network is what we need to focus on now. Every single country who's fighting needs to have a strategy that does not include American support, because America will be wiped out in the first strike. American government officials and whatnot should begin moving resources to other places to fight as a resistance, global resistance network, like against the communist and Islamic terrorist threats who I've talked about otherwise, like, will come into power after this war. We have to have our resistance networks that can fight indefinitely until we can collapse their nation or their ideologies globally. Like, America collapses, we need to prepare for that, build a resistance network, move supplies around, arm the global population with small arms weaponry, like hyper advanced javelins and stuff like that, and like even like weapons deposits that we just start placing like in plain sight all around the globe, combined with special forces training, like begin preparing for creating a global resistance network against the victors of the first strike of the Cold War. If we lose the Cold War, we can continue fighting indefinitely as an ideology of America, no longer a nation state, no longer a populace, no longer a country, but we can fight indefinitely for the republic model, free market trade and bartering, and like ethics and economics, and like that's the feasible strategy we should be working on right now. America has been infiltrated, she's corrupted, she's decaying, and she's going to collapse economically, theoretically, is what everyone thinks. And if we go into war, she's destroyed. So like, this is realistic. Hatred of the American government doesn't have to be the hatred of the republic model. And this is why I'm writing this. America is no longer a populace by birth, and it's no longer an ideology that is a nation state or a country. It's a belief system, essentially, like, and it's not a religious belief system or like a political. It's just about libertarian values and the model of the self-guided people. And anyways, this is a beginning of what we could get into if you guys are interested in talking about this at all.